Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. I bet he still writes poetry, one of them said. And then they all laughed. That's what I heard as I stood behind the hallway door, her voice mixing with the sound of wine glasses clinking and Spotify playing something upbeat in the background. I wasn't supposed to be home. They didn't know I'd left work early. She told me it was a girls' night. She didn't know I'd forgotten my laptop charger. I didn't move. I couldn't. My hand stayed frozen on the doorknob while my legs screamed to bolt. I stayed because I had to know how far the joke went. He made me pancakes the morning after I yelled at him. Who does that? She laughed again. The kind of laugh that had warmth when we first met. Now it just sounded like a blade. Girl, you married your therapist, someone else snorted. No, she replied. I married my emotional support animal. Laughter. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth would crack. I didn't breathe. I didn't cry. Not yet. She called me sensitive when I told her that her sarcasm hurt. She called me dramatic when I told her I felt invisible. And now, she was calling me weak, behind my back, like it was some hilarious inside joke at my expense. I turned around quietly and left without saying a word. I didn't take my charger. I didn't take my keys. I just walked until I couldn't feel my face from the cold. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part was when she texted me 3 hours later with, "Hope your meeting went well, 2 hearts. I'm headed to bed, face blowing a kiss." She had no clue I heard everything. She had no idea she'd cracked something in me that night. And she didn't expect what I'd do next. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of rage. Rage would have been easier. It was the humiliation. It sat in my chest like a brick. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard them laughing again. The words, emotional support animal, echoed like they were etched into my skull. She kissed me goodbye the next morning like nothing had happened, her lipstick barely touching my cheek, and said, "Don't forget we have dinner at my boss's tomorrow." I nodded, like a prop in the background of her life. But the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. It got tighter when I saw her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. Normally, I'd never touch it. I hated the idea of checking on someone. I still do. But something had shifted. Something broke in me the night before. I tapped the screen. A notification popped up from Julian Snake. I froze. I didn't know a Julian. I definitely didn't know why he had a snake emoji next to his name. I opened the message. Last night was unreal. I can still feel you. Can he tell? Faced with tears of joy. My heart stopped. I scrolled. A thread of texts, photos, hotel receipts. And then something that made my knees go weak. A second messaging app, one I'd never seen on her phone before. That's when I realized she had 2 phones. Her work phone was more than just a convenience. It was a second life. And I wasn't in it. I stood in the kitchen, phone in hand, shaking, while the shower ran. I didn't even have time to process before she walked in with a towel on, humming, hair dripping wet. She saw me. She saw the phone. Her face didn't change. Not at first. Then came the smile, tight-lipped, cold, almost amused. "You shouldn't go through my things, Emery." No panic. No apologies. Just that. And then she walked past me like I was air, like I didn't just witness the collapse of everything I believed was still salvageable. That was the moment I realized she wasn't afraid of losing me, because somewhere along the way, she already had. But she had no idea that I had just forwarded everything to myself. It took everything in me not to scream, not to confront her, not to grab the phone and demand answers. But I didn't. I played dumb. That was the hardest part, pretending everything was fine while I was cracking from the inside out. I went to work like usual. I answered her texts like usual. I smiled at her jokes like usual. But I was watching, listening, gathering. The next evening, we went to the dinner party she mentioned, her boss's home, upscale neighborhood, people in polished shoes and voices too smooth to be real. She looked stunning in a long black dress, and if I hadn't known what I knew, I might have believed the illusion. She wrapped her arm around mine in front of everyone, laughed loudly, told stories that made me sound like some quirky little husband who still cried during sad commercials. And they all laughed. Again, always the laughter. But here's the part that shook me. Julian was there. I recognized him instantly from one of the photos I had forwarded to myself. He wasn't just some fling. He worked with her. Closely. Probably every day. And the way she looked at him. Quick glances, lip bites, the 2 long smiles. It was all there. Right in front of me, like I was the audience to my own humiliation. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My palms were sweaty. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. locked the door, stared at myself in the mirror, and whispered, "Don't cry. Not here." When I came out, I caught them in the hallway. Not kissing, not touching, but close enough. His hand brushed her lower back, and she didn't flinch. She looked up at him like I never existed. And when she saw me standing there, frozen, all she said was, "There you are. We were just looking for you." I nodded. I didn't say a word. That night, as she slept beside me like nothing happened, I quietly got up, went to the guest room, opened my laptop, and began saving every screenshot, every message, every photo, every detail. Not because I wanted revenge, at least, not yet, but because I knew she was going to rewrite the story someday, and I needed the truth. My truth. Because something told me this wasn't the end of her betrayal. It was just the beginning. I didn't want to go back to that office party, not even in my memory, but something about the way Julian's hand lingered on her back wouldn't leave me alone. It played on a loop in my mind like some cruel movie trailer for a life I never agreed to star in. She smiled at him in a way that used to be reserved for me, before everything turned into smirks and silence. 2 days after the party, I got a call I didn't expect. Her boss, Gregory, called my personal number. He said he needed a quick word and asked if I could stop by his office. I thought maybe it was something about the party or some awkward attempt to apologize for how uncomfortable it had been. But the moment I stepped into his office, I knew it wasn't that. He closed the door, didn't sit, just leaned against his desk, arms crossed, looking like a man who knew too much but hated himself for it. I stayed quiet. He finally said, "I didn't invite you to that party. She insisted you come." I didn't understand what he meant, so I just asked why. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "To humiliate you. That's why." My mouth went dry. Apparently, Dina had told Gregory that she wanted to prove a point. Something about showing me how much of a joke I'd become. That people like Julian were real men, and that I was, in her words, a tragic little wallflower. Gregory didn't say it to hurt me. He looked disgusted with himself. Said he should have stopped it, should have never allowed it. But she was manipulative. And frankly, he was scared of her. "She talks about you like you're disposable," he said. "I thought you should know." I left that office on shaky legs, the world spinning sideways. I thought the worst part of betrayal was the act itself. I was wrong. It's realizing they were proud of it. That it wasn't a mistake, it was entertainment. A performance. And I was the unwilling, clueless star. When I got home that night, she was on the couch, texting someone. She looked up with that same tired expression, barely blinking. "Everything okay?" she asked without interest. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and wondered how long she'd been gone while still standing in front of me. I didn't answer. I just smiled and said, "Yeah, everything's perfect." Because now, I had a plan, and she'd never see it coming. It started with silence. That was my first move. No dramatic confrontations. No late-night arguments. Just distance. Cold, quiet distance. She didn't notice it at first. I still made coffee in the morning, still folded the laundry, still sent her "hope your meeting goes well" texts. But something shifted behind my eyes, and she must have felt it, even if she didn't want to admit it. That's the thing about people like Dina. They know when their control is slipping, even if they pretend otherwise. For 3 days, I acted normal. Too normal. I kissed her forehead, complimented her dress, even watched one of those painfully dull reality shows she liked. And every second of it made me sick. But I needed her calm. I needed her to believe I was back in her pocket, unaware, obedient. That's how I got access to the second phone again. Briefly, long enough to sync it to my old backup cloud. It was all there. The messages, the calendar appointments, the hidden photo albums. Even one labeled for rainy days. Spoiler alert, it wasn't weather-related. That's when I decided it was time for the first message. I printed out one of the photos from her secret folder. Nothing graphic, just compromising enough. Her in a hotel hallway, wearing a coat that clearly wasn't mine, looking up at someone who clearly wasn't me. I slipped it into an envelope and placed it neatly on her pillow, along with a note that read, "How many rainy days did it take before I disappeared completely?" Then I went to the guest room and locked the door. She came home around 6:30. I heard her heels click on the hardwood, heard the usual drop of her keys into the bowl near the front door. Then silence. I imagined her walking into the bedroom, seeing the envelope, tearing it open. I waited. 5 minutes later, I heard footsteps, fast ones, coming toward the guest room. The knob rattled. "Emery." Open the door. I said nothing. Where did you get this? Still nothing. Seriously? This is what we're doing now? And then, she laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she was nervous. Because she realized, for the first time, I wasn't begging. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't crying. I was watching, and she had no idea what was coming next. The morning after the envelope incident, she acted like nothing happened. Like the photo didn't exist. Like I hadn't silently declared war from the other side of the house. She made eggs, poured orange juice, even packed me a lunch like some sitcom wife pretending to be June Cleaver. But her hands were too steady. Her smile was too sharp. That's when I realized she was trying to regain control the only way she knew how, by performing. Pretending she wasn't scared. She was, but not scared of losing me. Scared of what I knew, of what I might do next. So I gave her something to really fear. That Friday, she had her department's quarterly networking event. Big deal, business casual, drinks and handshakes. She asked if I wanted to come. I said yes. She looked surprised, maybe even relieved. I think she believed I was folding, crawling back to my role as the safe, quiet husband who smiled through humiliation. The event was at a rooftop venue downtown. I showed up early, alone, and found the organizer. Told him I was doing a surprise photo montage for Dina and her team. She always bragged about being the company's star, so no one questioned it. I handed him a USB drive and said, "Please play this during the welcome speech. It's short." He nodded, smiled, plugged it in. 15 minutes later, Dina arrived in heels and false confidence. She spotted me near the back and beamed like everything was fine. I waved, calm, unmoving. Then the lights dimmed. The screen lit up. It started with generic photos, team lunches, office selfies, someone holding a birthday cake. Then the last few slides changed. The hallway photo. A text message. "He still thinks I'm working late. God, I could do this forever." Another image. Julian's arm around her waist. Their reflections caught in a mirrored elevator. The room went dead silent. I watched her face collapse in real time. First confusion, then disbelief. Then the color drained from her cheeks like someone had pulled the plug. She didn't move, didn't speak. Julian, standing near the bar, turned a full shade paler than her. Someone from HR audibly gasped. A woman next to me whispered, "Oh my God." The screen went black. No one clapped. No one said a word. I turned and walked out before she could find her voice. That night, she blew up my phone. 27 missed calls. 17 messages. "Why would you do this to me? You humiliated me. We can talk. Just come home." But she still didn't get it. I wasn't coming home. Because I wasn't hers anymore. 2 days. That's how long the silence lasted. I thought she'd barge into my temporary place the next morning, fists pounding, demanding an explanation or maybe some twisted apology. But she didn't. Just texts and missed calls, all going straight to voicemail. The silence was louder than anything she could have screamed. I figured she was regrouping, calculating. People like Dina don't spiral, they strategize. But on the third night, there was a knock at the door. I almost didn't answer. When I finally opened it, she was standing there. No makeup, hoodie pulled up like a teenager sneaking out, eyes bloodshot and swollen. She looked small. That was new. She used to walk into rooms like she owned them. Now she looked like she barely had the right to exist in one. She didn't speak, just stood there trembling until I finally asked, "What do you want?" Her voice cracked when she said, "You ruined me. Not you hurt me. Not I'm sorry. Just you ruined me." I let her in. I shouldn't have, but I did. She paced like a storm trapped in a bottle. Said HR had opened an internal investigation. Said Julian had taken personal leave, whatever that meant. Her team wasn't returning her emails. Her image, her perfect, polished, untouchable image, was unraveling. And in her mind, it was all my fault. "You could have just talked to me," she said, tears spilling over. "You didn't have to make me look like a monster." I finally looked at her, really looked at her, and asked, "Did you ever think I felt like one? Every time you laughed at me. Every time you let your friends mock me while I stood there like a prop. You don't get to cry now." She collapsed onto the couch, head in her hands, sobbing. I watched, waiting for something real, some truth, but it never came. Instead, between her sobs, she asked, "Can't we just fix this?" Fix what? The years of emotional erosion? The second phone? The lies spun so tightly around me that I forgot what it felt like to breathe without permission? I told her I'd already contacted a lawyer. That's when she truly fell apart. Not because she lost me, but because she was losing control. She begged. For the marriage? Maybe. But I think it was more for the reputation, the lifestyle, the optics. She couldn't stand the idea of being the one who got left. And the saddest part? She still didn't understand I was already gone long before I walked out that door. The day the divorce was finalized, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't throw a party or post cryptic quotes about freedom online. I just sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot, watching strangers walk by, wondering how many of them were pretending, like I used to. Pretending everything was fine. Pretending love hadn't rotted into something unrecognizable. Dina didn't show up. She had her attorney handle it. Of course she did. That's how she always was. Only present when she could control the story. But I had one final story to write. I went back to the house we once shared. It was quiet. Cold. The furniture was still there, but none of it felt real anymore. Just props in a play I was no longer performing in. I gathered the last of my things, an old sweater, some books she always said made me too emotional, and our wedding album. She'd kept it hidden in the back of a drawer, probably too ashamed to display it, too proud to throw it away. I flipped through it one last time. We looked so young, so hopeful, like people who had no idea how loud silence could get. Then I added one more page. It was a printed photo. Me, smiling, standing at the edge of a cliff during my solo trip to Colorado last month. I looked tired, yes, but alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Below the photo, I wrote, "Sometimes we break to become whole. I hope you find whatever it is you were searching for without having to destroy someone next time." I left the album on the coffee table. No note, no dramatic message, and I walked away for the last time. These days, I live in a small apartment above a bakery. I take long walks. I've joined a book club. I still cry during sad movies, but now, I don't feel ashamed of it. I feel human, and that's enough. Dina was right about one thing. I was never the man she wanted. But now I'm finally the man I needed. Which moment in this story struck you the most? Was it the photo at the party, the final note, or something smaller? Tell us in the comments. This has been another true story on Reddit Confessions. Thanks for watching, and remember, your voice matters.